What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back. As always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel. Today, we're here to discuss Packers' performance against the Chicago Bears with a big picture view of what we've seen, not just in that game, but in recent weeks, as the Green Bay Packers head into the playoffs. In the last video, we discussed the importance of momentum, or at least my belief in it, heading into the postseason, and that's an element that Packers aren't going to have, or they're going to have to conjure up on their own over the next week. But before we dive in, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work, including multiple article versions of what we're discussing here today, over at ESPNLacrosse.com. And for my Wisconsin sports radio fans, you know what to do. Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers radio. Download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for your Wisconsin sports radio needs. Find me there multiple days per week talking Green Bay Packers. So, like I said, we're going to discuss kind of big picture where the Packers are at right now. What's next for them as they go into a playoff matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles. Just a year ago, the 2023 Green Bay Packers, they were entering the postseason on a 3-game win streak, and they were in playoff mode already. They had to win those final 3 games of the season to even have the chance to be in the playoffs. Fast forward to where we are today, the 2024 Green Bay Packers, both teams a 7 seed. This year's Packers team won 2 more games. They got to the 11-win mark, but they're on different trajectories. The 2023 Green Bay Packers, while 9-8, while the 7th seed in the NFC, on the field, were operating as one of the, especially on offense, one of the best units in the NFL. They had that momentum. They had been in playoff mode for several weeks. They were riding that wave into Dallas and then into San Francisco. This year's team, however, they're on a 2-game losing streak, and they really specifically on the offense, but we'll touch on it here, what happened against the Chicago Bears. But particularly in that game, in all phases, coaching, they've hit a bit of a rough patch at this time, and now are going to have to flip the switch. Like, there's no time to find consistency is gone. It's now or never. It's the postseason. You lose, your season's over. They're going to have to flip the switch and overcome many of the same problems that have plagued them for much of the year. A lot of the things that we've been nitpicking about this Packers team, and I do want to use that term because, again, they're in the playoffs. They got to 11 wins. Been a lot of good, obviously, that's happened this season. But a lot of the issues that we've nitpicked from week 1 to where we are now are fairly similar, right? There's a lot of the same problems that have continued to fester, sometimes more than others, sometimes at different points in the season, but have continued to fester up to this point to where we are now. So 18 games in, they still haven't been able to quite put it all together, at least not for an extended period of time, right? And like I said, it's now or never for this Packers team. Against the Chicago Bears, they were productive in the run game. 183 yards on the ground, 5.5 yards per rush. However, it didn't translate into points. Less than 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Packers still had just 13 points in that game. And what got them over that hump was a big play by Carrington Valentine to force a fumble in Chicago territory, which, credit to the offense, they were able to capitalize on. The run game has been the catalyst for this Packers offense this season. We've talked about it a ton here. However, it's very difficult in today's NFL for that to be your only method for moving the football, because the margin for error is really, really slim when that's the only element that you can truly lean on, right? Because you're not gonna knock out a 4, 5, 6 yard run on every carry. So when you don't, like we've talked about on here, what happens? You're behind the sticks, right? You're in those 2nd and long, 3rd and long, obvious, predictable passing situations where the defense now has the upper hand. They have the upper hand from a coverage standpoint. There's only so many routes you can run when you're facing a 3rd and 10, right? That's going to carry you beyond the sticks. The pass rush, they don't have to worry about the run game. They're pinning their ears back. They're doing everything they can to just go and get the quarterback. The defense has the advantage. And of course, like I said, you're not going to get 4, 5, 6 yard runs on every single carry. You may average that over the course of a game because of some chunk runs, but you're not going to do that on every single carry. So those instances where you don't, like I said, you're in those 2nd and 8, pesky, long down and distance situations. And now there's more of a burden on your passing game because they're operating from a disadvantageous situation to have to shoulder that workload, which right now for the Packers has been really, really difficult. And that brings us to really the biggest issue that we've seen, particularly over the last 2 games for sure. But the passing game woes extend back to that New Orleans Saints game. I know the Packers put up 34 points in that game. They won 34-0, but they weren't the feeling, the sentiment coming out of that game in the locker room and the post-game press conferences was that there's still more out there for this team. And I think just about everyone watching that game would agree as well. The passing game just hasn't been steady enough, hasn't been good enough these last few weeks. And even with a productive running game, which it was against Minnesota, but when you're behind by multiple scores early on, that zaps your ability to lean on it. Or as we saw against the Chicago Bears, if that's really your only avenue for moving the ball, like we just described, the margin for error is really, really slim. You need a passing game to complement the run game, to marry with the run game, to build off of each other. That's when, not just the Packers offense, but football in general, that's when you're going to see an offense at its most productive. But that's the part for the Packers that's been lacking. So now let's take a little bit closer look at that Packers passing game. Obviously, Jordan Love left that game early with an elbow injury, which afterwards Matt LaFleur said he should be good to go for the Philadelphia game. And had that been a playoff game, I think Matt LaFleur even said that Love would have gone back into that game. So they held him out for precautionary reasons. But obviously, not having Jordan Love is going to impact your passing game numbers, your passing game effectiveness over the course of 4 quarters. But we're not just, when we're talking about the passing game struggles, as I mentioned, it's not just this Bears game, right? This is what's become a multi-week issue that the Green Bay Packers are dealing with. So against the Chicago Bears, Jordan Love was 7 for 12, 69 passing yards, had a 19-yard completion in there. That did a lot of the heavy lifting in the passing category. That stat line's fine, right? That's not going to leap off the page. It's not awful by any means, but as a collective unit, the Packers averaged just 6.6 yards per pass attempt on offense against the Chicago Bears. For some context, if we take that figure and compare it to season-long averages, that would rank 31st in the NFL. Again, just to provide some context around how just lackluster of a number that efficiency metric is. This is coming off a performance then against the Minnesota Vikings where through 3 quarters, Jordan Love had less than 100 passing yards in that game. And since the New Orleans game, so 3 games now, Jordan Love's completing just 68% of his passes. That ranks 28th out of 36 eligible quarterbacks during that span. He's averaging just 6.2 yards per pass attempt. That ranks 28th, again, during that span. His passer rating over those 3 games ranks 22nd. Now, positive, thrown no interceptions. Pro Football Focus also keeps track of turnover-worthy plays. So throws that maybe they didn't end in an interception, maybe the defensive back dropped it, but that PFF deemed that should have been turnover-worthy. Love doesn't have any during that 3-game stretch either. He's taking care of the football. It's a positive. But on the flip side of that, he also only has 2 touchdown passes over 3 games to go with that as well. And I thought after the game, Love used the perfect word to describe what we're seeing from this Packers passing game, and that's stagnant, right? And we talk about it on here all the time. There's the beautiful thing about football, right? It's so nuanced. There's so many different elements, factors, players that go into contributing to any sort of success that we see and into any sort of failure that we see. So for Love, and these are things that he mentioned, accuracy, ball placement on his part are things that have to improve. And while obviously much of the attention is always going to go towards the quarterback position, it's not only on Jordan Love, right? The ups and downs that we're seeing in the passing game, it's the receiver position as well. I mean, Jaden Reed, after Sunday's loss to the Bears, said he has to be better. Very, very adamantly said, I have to be better if I want to produce in the NFL, if I want to be a leader on this team, can't drop the ball, can't fumble the ball. And that's Jaden Reed's perspective, but that's what the Packers need from their entire wide receiver room. I mean, going back to that Minnesota Vikings game afterwards, LaFleur talked about how the Vikings' more heavy usage of man coverage in that game did seem to catch the Green Bay Packers off guard a little bit. They hadn't game planned for that approach as much. They weren't expecting to get that. And that adjustment, that tweak by the Minnesota Vikings seemed to just throw off and dismantle the entire Packers passing game. In those man coverage reps, the Green Bay receivers weren't winning consistently enough. that different look threw off the timing, the rhythm of the routes, not being where you're supposed to be at the right time, not being in the exact precise spot that you're supposed to be. All of that was thrown off. So all of these are different factors that at the end of the day has resulted in some, what I think is indecisive play from Jordan Love. And just generally speaking, a passing game that's out of whack, out of rhythm, out of sync, all of those different things. And it's resulting in the, again, struggles we're seeing on the offensive side of the ball. The struggles to get off to a fast start, the struggle to put up points, the struggle to combine the effectiveness that the run game's having with a potent passing game. Those are all things that the Packers are dealing with right now, and obviously they're going to have to overcome. Now, something else that Jordan Love added is he does think that they are close. He said that he doesn't believe that this is some major issue that they're going to have to overcome, because the stuff that they're dialing up in the passing game, he says a lot of it's there, right? It's not as if guys aren't unable to get open. There's things that are there, but it comes down to the execution. And when those advantageous looks, matchups, whatever it might be, present themselves, executing at a high level to take advantage of it. Now, obviously, Love exiting the game, we talked about that, it's going to impact your passing game, right? They didn't have Christian Watson against the Minnesota Vikings. He left early with an injury against the Chicago Bears. Romeo Doubs didn't suit up against the Chicago Bears. Obviously, not having those players on the field going to impact your passing game. But with that said, there's already reports out there that Christian Watson suffered an ACL injury against the Chicago Bears. So the Packers' new reality is that offense, that passing game is going to have to function in the playoffs without him. Because it sounds like they're going to be without him for the time being. There's also, as we talked about, the strength of this receiver room, right, is the strength in numbers. It's the depth that they have. It's the variety of skill sets that they have. The ability to mix and match all those different abilities and take advantage of defenses, forcing them to defend the entire field, forcing them to spread out, taking advantage of that spacing when it's there. But Packers haven't been able to do that. The jumps that I think we were hoping, expecting to a degree to see from Jaden Reed, from Dontavian Wicks in their second NFL seasons haven't quite happened, or at least not consistently enough for this Packers receiver room. So again, it's on everyone, not just one thing. It's the game plan. It's Jordan Love under center. It's the receivers in the passing game. But all of those different elements and things that are going awry right now are leading to a disjointed passing game. And it's not just against the Bears, not just against the Vikings. I think it goes back to that Saints game as well. And it's something that, like I said at the start of all this, time's not on the Packers' side anymore. I feel like at least once a week in these videos for the last month and a half, we've been talking about finding consistency, maintaining some sort of momentum on the offensive side of the ball. And again, there's been stretches of it, but the time factor of all this is now gone. It's now or never. It's win or go home. They have to figure it out. The switch has to get flipped. Now, before we get out of here, last thing I'll say, and obviously our focus has been on the offensive side of the ball. Because like I said, the passing game specifically, I think is the biggest hurdle that the Packers have to overcome as they prepare for the Philadelphia Eagles in the playoffs, but particularly against the Bears. It was an unspectacular performance by really the entire team. There were significant mistakes, miscues, errors in really all three phases, as well as the coaching aspect as well. And again, just like the passing game didn't have Watson for most of the game, didn't have Doubs in that game, Josh Jacobs also only had 6 carries. We also saw on the defensive side of the ball, the Packers opted to have Kitano Oladapo start next to Xavier McKinney, his first NFL start. And I really think that was done for the continuity component of it for Javon Bullard. Because with Oladapo back there while Williams, Zane Anderson are out, it allowed Bullard to stay in the slot. And I think that continuity, rather than him bouncing back and forth between the nickel, between the safety positions, were really important for the Packers and something that they wanted to accomplish. Because like Hafley's talked about, with Javon Bullard being a rookie, asking him to go back and forth in game or even week to week, that's putting a lot on his plate, and it's taking away from his ability to just focus on that one thing. So I think the Packers are preparing for at least one of Williams or Anderson to be back for the playoffs, which obviously one of those players would start next to McKinney, and then Javon Bullard would be in the slot. So rather than him, playing from the slot against Minnesota, then having to move to safety middle of the game, and then having to move to safety for the Bears game in Week 18. They said, all right, let's play him in the nickel this week. Hopefully we get Anderson and or Williams back for the playoffs. We can keep him in the nickel for that Philadelphia game, just for the continuity of being a rookie, focusing on one position, and just getting really dialed into what those specific responsibilities entail. So again, the point of all that, the little path we just went down, is the Packers were without some key players in this game against the Chicago Bears. But on the flip side, for the most part, most of their starters, their regular contributors and starters, played all 4 quarters of that game against the Chicago Bears. And again, there's a lot of same issues. The defense, all 3 losses that the Packers have had since the bye week, to Detroit, to Minnesota, and now to Chicago, the defense late in the game had the opportunity to get a stop, had the opportunity to get off the field, give the ball back to their offense, and they couldn't do it. And particularly in this game against Chicago, that final play where Packers were just trying to take away the boundary, play to the middle of the field to let the clock run out, just a very, very passive play call from Jeff Hafley, and really not something that not an approach that we've seen from him this season. There are 15 seconds left on the clock, and Matt LaFleur said after that, typically that approach that Hafley took would just get to the middle of the field, hope that they run out of time. Typically, your mark for that is 12 seconds. So the Bears had 3 extra seconds with 15 on the clock to be able to run that play. And obviously, they got up to the ball, spiked it, and then kicked the game-winning field goal. In addition to that, Matt LaFleur, time management at the end of the game. His indecisiveness about whether to go for it on 4th down or have Brandon McManus kick that 55-yarder led to him using a timeout. Had he not used that timeout and just knew, all right, we're going to go out there and kick the field goal, the clock could have run off another, 25, 30 seconds, giving the Chicago Bears even less time. And then the special teams play, quality trick play dialed up by the Chicago Bears there, absolutely fooled the Green Bay Packers punt coverage team. The only Packers player on that side of the field where the punt returner was running was Daniel Whalen. Everyone else was on the opposite side of the field. So there, another 7 points surrendered by the Packers from overall just sloppy play in this game. And I thought Xavier McKinney said it best afterwards. He goes, it's us versus us. Got to stop beating ourselves. And again, that's really the theme, everything that we keep going back to in these conversations. It's just the self-inflicted mistakes that this Packers team continues to battle, that they have to continue to finding a way to overcome. I've mentioned this before we get out of here. Mentioned this before, and Gutekunst talked about it during the bye week, the importance of playing your best football at the end of the season. 2023 Packers, they were playing their best version of football here in January, here in the playoffs. This year's Packers team, they're not. And we've seen teams who are hot at the end of the year go on runs in the playoffs. We've seen teams who maybe have a good record. We've seen it here in Green Bay before, but they're not necessarily playing their best football. They're middling a little bit, and that gets them sent home early. Now, those past results, previous teams, Packers or not, obviously has zero bearing on how things play out for the 2024 Packers, right? With the talent that's on this team, they have the ability to flip the switch, right? Like I said, I know it feels doom and gloom right now, but they got to 11 wins this season. On both sides of the football, offense and defense, they finished the regular season top 10 in scoring. They had a 5-game stretch where they put up 30 points on the offensive side of the ball in each of those games, 30 or more points. So there's been a lot of good. The talent is there 100% for this group to be able to flip the switch. The uncertainty with that from the outside perspective, because if you're in that locker room, you can feel the belief that's still there, right? And they absolutely know this felt like a bit of a reality check as of late. They know that they have to get back to work. They know that they have to focus in on the details. They know that they have to bring the right energy day in and day out to their preparation. Be very, very meticulous and focused how they go through each of their drills throughout practice, what they do in the meeting rooms. Everybody realizes that all that has to be elevated, right? So that the play on Sundays reflects the work that's being put in. But the belief in the locker room, in their ability to accomplish that, I think is certainly still there. Now, from the outside perspective, we have to see it, right? And that's obviously going to be the challenge. We can talk about the potential that's there, the talent that's there, the numbers that they put up this season, all of those positives, all of those good things. But now it has to happen, right? We're out of time. They have to find a way to flip that switch, and accomplishing those things, doing all those aspects that we mentioned, finding that consistency obviously gets a lot more tougher right now. You're going on the road in the playoffs. You're obviously going to have to play the top teams in the NFC. Philadelphia, Detroit, Minnesota, and Tampa Bay, all ranked top 10 in the NFL in scoring this season. Your obvious hope is that the Packers defense can limit the points that those teams put up, but chances are, in asking the Packers defense to have to do that for 4 quarters, back-to-back-to-back weeks, again, a very, very tall task. The Packers offense is going to have to put up points. They're going to have to not fall behind in these games. And so in order to do that, given where they are right now, and they have the ability to do it, they have to flip the switch. But of course, our big question is, can they do it? As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you've made it this far, you might as well hit like. You might as well hit subscribe on the video. I do greatly appreciate it. Find out my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Download the 1055 ESPN Lacrosse app. And until next time, friends, take care.